Hey, come on in, come on in. What can I do for you? Hey, how's it going, Sergeant? Hey, I'm coming in because I wanted to, talk to you about re-enlisting, but I do have some demands that I'm kind of hoping to meet if you want to keep an amazing soldier such as myself. Oh, do you now? Oh, all right. Let's see what we can work out then, huh? Well, first thing, I was, looking to get some extra cash in my pocket, hoping to get some kind of bonus. Yeah, we can take a look at that. We can see what we can do there. Well, I kind of would like to get an education. I'd like to do the college option to get some school in, maybe go work on a degree. Yeah, it's not gonna happen. No, your ass is too stupid. You ain't going to school. Harsh. All right. I mean, I want to do choice of duty station. Choice of duty station. Okay. Where do you want to go? I was thinking, I don't know, Italy. Did you say Italy? Italy. If I could get you Italy, do you think I would be here in this hellhole? No, my ass would be in Italy. How the hell do you think I'm gonna get you Italy? You kidding me? What else? What else you got? I don't know. What can you offer me then? Well, I don't know. Let's see. Get you a water bottle. A water bottle? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really nice one. It's got the Army logo on it. It's pretty cool. Can you throw in, I don't know, like a t-shirt? Yeah. Fuck it. All right. What's up, my friends? U.S. Army veteran Christopher Chaos, and today I wanted to talk to you about re-enlisting in the United States Army, which basically means renewing your contract. If your contract is about to end, then you have the opportunity to re-enlist or renew your contract. And I kind of want to talk about how that basically works in the United States Army. Me, myself, I re-enlisted 3 times, not really by choice. I really just kind of wanted to make sure that when I was getting out of the Army, I was in a good place to get out of the Army. So the first time it came about for me to end my Army contract, I was stationed in Korea, and I felt it was gonna be very hard for me to be able to kind of line up some good opportunities from another country. So I re-enlisted while I was in Korea to get me back to the United States. I re-enlisted a second time because my unit was getting ready to deploy to Iraq and I was gonna get stop lost anyway, so I might as well just re-enlist and get a bonus out of it. And then third time I re-enlisted was to basically try to prevent myself from being sent back to Korea and being back in that same situation so I could stay in Fort Carson, Colorado, and then get out of the Army, which after the third time, after I finished that contract out, I did get out of the Army. But I want to tell you how that kind of process kind of works. So at the unit level, you have what is called a retention NCO. That is someone that is kind of like, you could think of it as a recruiter for your unit. That person's job is to try to retain soldiers, to try to get soldiers to want to stay in the Army forever or whatever the case might be, and give them options and everything to allow them to hopefully maybe stay in the Army, because obviously that's what the Army wants, is soldiers to stay in for a long time. So let's say, for example, a soldier that does a 4-year contract. That's a pretty common one, pretty common that people do a 4-year contract. When they have 12 months left on that contract, they're then eligible to try to re-enlist. It is not a guaranteed thing, right? If you have certain kind of situations that can prevent you from re-enlisting, things like if you failed the physical fitness test, you're overweight, maybe you're gotten a lot of trouble kind of a thing. There's a lot of things that will consider you as what is known as barred for re-enlistment. If you're in that category, then you're not able to re-enlist. So the common ones I've seen are people who are overweight, they can't pass the weigh-in tape, so they're flagged is what it's called, and they're not eligible to re-enlist. Or they can't pass the physical fitness test, so they're ineligible to re-enlist. And there's a lot of other kind of categories that kind of fall in that category, but this is not like a guaranteed thing. You're not guaranteed to be able to re-enlist. There are circumstances that can prevent you from being eligible to re-enlist. But if you are eligible to re-enlist, then you would go and see that retention NCO. They're probably gonna start bugging you anyways. They probably have something that keeps track of it usually, and they wanna start talking to you. Hey, I see you're in your window for re-enlistment. You wanna come talk to me about, maybe some opportunities, some things you can possibly get and all that kind of stuff to try to wheel and deal you to try to get you to stay in the Army, but that is when you are eligible. I believe they actually say that between 12 months and 90 days from getting out, and they kind of say that you have to make a decision when you have 90 days left in the Army, and that's kind of the cutoff area. But I have seen people that waited up until the last like few weeks or whatever and then re-enlisted because they weren't too sure. They thought they were going to get out, and then something came about, maybe some kind of, family issues or financial issues or something like that, and they were like, nope, I'm gonna have to stay in. So I have seen that 90 days is kind of your cutoff time to make a decision, but I have also seen people re-enlist last minute. So when that soldier goes to that retention NCO, they sit down, they talk to him about maybe what they want to do, what they're trying to see, what is available. There are possibly a lot of incentives that are available to that soldier to stay in the Army. Sometimes there is nothing. It really just depends on kind of their MOS, the current times as far as needs of the Army and what they're offering at that moment. If that soldier is in a specific MOS, let's say they're in an MOS that is already pretty high strength, right? Maybe they're even close to being overstrength or whatever. They may have very few options available to them because they're not really too worried about keeping soldiers in that MOS. But if they are in an MOS that is very short-handed, then they want to try to retain those individuals, so there might be more incentives to try to get that person to stay. Let's talk about some of those incentives that a soldier might have available to them to possibly get them to stay in the Army. The one that a lot of people kind of associate is a bonus. And yes, sometimes there is a bonus available. Again, that does depend on the current needs of the Army to determine if there's a bonus. Like if it's an MOS that is in desperate need, then yeah, they're gonna probably offer some kind of money incentive to try to keep those people. But if they're in a MOS that's not very in demand of keeping soldiers, then there may not even be a bonus at all available. The amount of the bonus can vary. I mean, it can be something as small as like $1,000, $2,000. I think the cap is 40,000 for re-enlisting. I don't know if that's very common with re-enlisting. I know sometimes I have seen that with like infantry for enlisting into the infantry. I don't know if they still kind of do 40,000 with re-enlisting thing, but I've seen individuals in my personal experience that have re-enlisted for as little as like 1,000, 2,000. That's kind of what I did. I got a bonus for 2,000, but I've also seen other soldiers that have gotten like $10,000, maybe $5,000 as a re-enlistment bonus. A lot of times that's paid out completely, right? It is taxed, so it will be taxed kind of a thing. Unless you're lucky enough to re-enlist in a combat zone. If you re-enlist in a combat zone, then the bonus is tax-free. And a lot of people sometimes would hold off until deployment and then re-enlist because they'd get that bonus tax-free. But if you're not in a combat zone, you re-enlist, whatever the bonus was, it is still gonna get taxed. But you will get that probably with your paycheck. All of a sudden, one of your paychecks will be really large. There are some times where the stipulation for the bonus maybe requires it to be paid out over the next like year, the next 2 years. Sometimes it just kind of depends on the stipulation for the bonus. And sometimes like larger bonuses, that might be the case. With smaller bonuses, they usually don't mess with that and you just get it all at one time, maybe in your next paycheck or whatever. But sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes with larger bonuses, they might have a stipulation like that where it comes in payments. Another option that a soldier might have available to them is choice of duty station. That's a pretty common one sometimes, but there is still technicalities with that. It's not just free for all because you're re-enlisting, you can basically get anywhere as you want to go. That's not the case. Definitely like with me, right? With the very first time I re-enlisted, I wanted to re-enlist and I wanted to re-enlist for Fort Irwin because I wanted to be closer to family. I wanted to be in California. Fort Irwin was about like 2 or 3 hours from my hometown, so it was gonna be very easy to visit family, maybe on the weekend, on a 4-day weekend if I wanted to, but it wasn't available because they were already at capacity for my MOS at Fort Irwin, so my options to re-enlist for Fort Irwin was not available. My second choice I remember was Fort Huachuca, and Fort Huachuca for my MOS only had 2 slots, so that wasn't happening, so I didn't get that. So then my third choice ended up being Fort Carson, and that was available, so I was basically able to get my third choice of, kind of settling on what I wanted to get for my choice of duty station for re-enlisting. So other soldiers would be in that same kind of ballpark, right? If they want to stay at that duty station, they can. They can re-enlist to stay there, right? They don't want to take the chance of coming up on orders. They choose to have that stabilization is probably part of it, to not have to worry about coming up on orders, to be sent to some other duty station they don't want to go to. They want to stay where they're currently at because they really like it, and they can choose to re-enlist to do so. That is actually what I did for my third time when I re-enlisted to try to prevent going from Korea again. So I re-enlisted so I could stay in Fort Carson, Colorado. Re-enlisting to stay at your location is usually fairly easy to get. It's sometimes just trying to go outside of that that can get complicated because then they have to look into, is it available? I briefly touched on it, but stabilization kind of sometimes is a part of that package too, where maybe especially when the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War was very active with a lot of units deploying to it, Sometimes people would re-enlist to go to another unit and get stabilization, which would make it to where they would not deploy for maybe 12 months, or maybe it was for 2 years or whatever. It's usually kind of in that ballpark. It wouldn't be, like for 5 years or anything like that, but maybe like 1 year, 2 years, to where they were guaranteed that they would not deploy for that amount of time. So they re-enlisted, that way they could spend time with family. Maybe they're just tired of the active deployment rotation and they're re-enlisting to kind of take a little bit of a break from that, but also go to the duty assignment that they want. So sometimes that was an option that soldiers would take advantage of, is trying to get that stabilization to avoid having to do another deployment. Maybe they just got off of one. Another pretty popular incentive that soldiers re-enlist for is for college, right? Especially when you're on active duty. It's really hard for you to be able to do, courses and do college courses, because you have to try to do these online courses probably in the evenings, and then if you have to go to the field, then it kind of becomes a pain in the ass. Sometimes you just have an exhausting week and you're not very motivated to want to go and bust your ass at work or in the motor pool or whatever doing training, and then on your free time try to work on college classes, work on homework. So sometimes it's very difficult for soldiers on active duty, depending on the unit they're in, depending on the MOS they're in, to do at those kind of schools. So a lot of times soldiers use that incentive of re-enlisting to go ahead and have that opportunity to take college courses during the day. So college option is a pretty popular one. This allows a soldier to, during the day, instead of going to work and do their MOS, go to college. And usually it's for like 1 semester. So it's not like a whole degree type of thing. You're not gonna get to go do this for 2 years or whatever, or like, for a whole associate's degree or whatever. The only kind of way you can kind of do that is the Green to Gold program. But for college option, you're re-enlisted, so you can do a semester of college. It's only gonna be for 1 semester. So that would allow soldiers to, a lot of times, would depend on the unit really, just simply show up for first formation in the morning and get accountability. That way they make sure that, hey, they're still alive, they're still well and everything like that. And then instead of them doing PT, they get to take off to go get ready for school, and they get to just do class the rest of the day. And they're only really having to show up in the morning just for accountability to make sure that, yes, this person's still alive, they're still healthy, and they are doing what they're saying they're doing. Soldiers don't have to go to college class in uniform, so they can easily just go back home, go back to the barracks, change into civilian clothes, go to those college classes and spend that time there. The other nice thing about it is you don't always have class Monday through Friday. You might have a class on Monday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays or something, whatever, right? And even on the days that you didn't have classes, they would still leave you alone. You showed up for first formation, and even though you don't have class that day, you could use that time to work on homework, right? So that was your dedicated time to work on assignments, work on your homework for those college classes, because the main important thing is you have to pass these classes. If you fail these classes, you have to pay for that class, because the Army is gonna pay for you to go to these classes with the tuition assistance. So that's with the assumption you're gonna pass the class, and if you fail it, then you are responsible for paying for that class because you failed that class. So the units usually want to give that soldier ample amount of time to be able to study for the course, to pass the tests, to do their assignments and everything. That they are successful in that course and they don't fail anything. That will, of course, vary by the unit. I saw, like before, with some units where they're like, no, if you don't have class, you're gonna be here in the motor pool. You're gonna do PT in the morning because your class doesn't start until 9 o'clock anyway, so you're gonna do PT. That definitely varies by the unit, kind of a thing. Some units were pretty cool about it, where I would see soldiers re-enlist for college option and they would just make them show up for first accountability and then take off for the rest of the day. I've even heard stories of some units where they'd be like, no, all you gotta do is just give your squad leader a call during the day and tell them you're still alive. You don't even need to show up. So that's really relaxed. It's really gonna depend on the discretion of the unit. I actually did that for one of the times I re-enlisted. I re-enlisted to do that, but my unit was not quite as relaxed as everybody else's might have been, kind of a thing. So I did have to do PT in the morning, but then I got to go to class, but I was only really allowed to go to class when I had class. If I didn't have class, I still had to show up and do work. So mine wasn't quite as relaxed as I've seen other soldiers get, or even been told stories about people that did college options. So mine was a little bit more restrictive, but I did take advantage of this the third time I re-enlisted. Sometimes the incentive for re-enlisting is to change MOSs. Now, this is not a guaranteed thing. Don't think that you can join the Army and if you don't like the MOS, you can just switch. Sometimes that might be possible, but sometimes that might not be possible. I've said this before, but the Army definitely is this type of system where it comes down to needs of the Army. So back to kind of what I was talking about with bonuses, if you're in an MOS that is under strength, they really need people, they might not be very willing to want to let you go reclass type of thing. Or if you're trying to get into an MOS that's already highly populated with individuals at that rank or at that experience level type of thing. And they don't really want to take on, someone else in that MOS or to transfer to that MOS. So you might not have that MOS available for you to reclass to because they're already over strength or they're pretty close to capacity. So they're not accepting you to reclass to that MOS. But if you are in an MOS that maybe is like over strength and you're trying to go into MOS that is under strength, then yeah, they're probably gonna be pretty willing to want you to change over to MOS, and they might even offer you a bonus to do so. So it really depends on needs of the Army, but I always tell people, don't go into the Army expecting that if I don't like it, I can just change jobs and change MOSs. That may not be an option. I've heard from people where they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna join the Army and I'm gonna do this MOS, do that for about 4 years, then I'm gonna switch over to this MOS, do that one for 4 years, then I'm gonna switch over to this MOS. No, you're usually pretty lucky if you can reclass once, might less a third time. I almost kind of wish that maybe I would have reclassed. Maybe I would have enjoyed being in the Army more. I don't really know. Maybe I could have reclassed to something. I think it's like a 25 Victor or something like that to do video production in the United States Army. And maybe I would have enjoyed being in the Army a little bit more. I mean, I wouldn't make as much as I make on the civilian side. I wouldn't have as much freedom, but maybe I would have enjoyed it. Maybe switch things up a little bit. I don't really know. Someone who is on active duty can re-enlist to go to reserves, right? If they don't want to do active duty anymore, they're like, hey, I want to re-enlist, but I want to go over to the reserves. That can be done. I've seen a lot of soldiers do that, especially like if you are only maybe on your first contract. You only did 4 years. Well, in the Army, you have a commitment of 8, right? That can either be done on 4 years on active duty or reserves, and then another 4 years of inactive reserve, which is very different. It's kind of like you're on call and they could call you up, but they probably won't call you up, and you most likely won't do anything while you're on inactive reserves, but you could until you get to that point where you have served a total of 8 years. So sometimes I've seen people where they do 4 years on active duty and then they switch over and do 4 years on reserves to finish up their whole time and then not have any IRR or inactive reserve time to have to kind of fulfill afterwards. Or they just simply want to get away from it all and get away from active duty life and just part-time do it, maybe go to school, maybe get another job, whatever. That was even a thing I had to do when I was getting out of the Army. I had to go see the reserve, basically retention NCO type of thing, the reserve recruiter that we had on base essentially, to talk to him about going into the reserves, right? To try to see if I would be interested in getting out of active duty and going to the reserves rather than just simply getting out of the Army. I obviously wasn't interested in that, but I remember they made me think about it for a day because I needed this individual to sign off my paperwork. That was one of the check marks or one of the blocks I had to check off before I can get out of the Army and clear everything out. Was I have to get that individual's signature to say that I talked to him, and I had to go see him one day and he would not sign my paperwork until the following day. That way I had a day to think about it. And of course, when I came back, told him, nope, not interested in joining the reserves. He was cool about it and he wasn't pressuring me into it or anything like that. He was like, okay, all right then, signed off my paperwork. And I was able to finish clearing and just simply get out of the Army. I did do more than 8 years, so I didn't have to worry about an inactive reserve time frame because I actually did almost 11 years and then got out. Sometimes there's other incentives. I don't know that I've always heard it as a joke. I don't think it's an actual thing. People always joke about, oh, I'll re-enlist for a Camaro or for a Mustang kind of a thing. I don't think I've heard people joke about it, and I've even heard people say that they were offered that kind of a thing before, but I don't actually know anybody that really had that happen. I just think it's always just a joke. So you may not get anything cool like that, like getting a cool car. You might get a water bottle and a backpack. Just because I feel like I should probably cover this in case there's somebody watching this that's talking to someone that says they're in the military. There is no fee to get out of the Army. If you are done with your contract and you don't want to stay in the Army, that's fine. They will let you get out of the Army. They're not going to force you to stay in the Army. You're not going to have to pay a fee to get out of the Army. It's just you're done with your contract. You go through a clearing process. It might take a couple months or whatever. Do some classes to kind of prepare you for the civilian world, and then you're free. You're out of the Army. And then if you have, less than 8 years in, then you still have that IRR commitment where they technically could call you back if they really needed you. So, I mean, you might be someone who only wants to do 4 years and then get out. Maybe you want to do 10 years and get out. Maybe you want to do 20 and retire kind of a thing. But there are some situations that, really encourage soldiers to want to stay in the Army. And if you want to learn about that, I have a video right here as to why commonly soldiers do re-enlist to stay in the Army. If you want to see my latest video upload, I got it right here. I have links down in the description box for the Discord channel, for my Instagram, all sorts of stuff. Check out the links down below. I'm Christopher Chaos. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you next time. See ya.